talking about the relevance of the Black church in the community. Historically, the Black church has been known for movements of the civil rights and making sure that there's equality for all people. So today we're going to talk about the relevance of the Black community, particularly in the climate in which we are living in now, where racial tensions appears to be an everyday narrative for us. So I'm going to start with Sylvia Jordan, and she's going to introduce herself. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Jordan. I'm from Mansfield, Ohio. I currently live in Riverview, Florida. I attended the University of Cincinnati for my undergrad in criminal justice, and I graduated at Walden University with my master's in social work.
Thank you. Kiana?
Hi, my name is Kiana Taylor. I'm from Mansfield as well, currently living in Columbus, Ohio. I graduated from Central State University with my major was sociology with a minor in criminal justice. Currently, I'm enrolled in Central Michigan University pursuing my MBA.
Thank you. Kristen?
Hi, my name is Kristen Thorpe, and I'm from Pittsburgh, currently living in Virginia. I went to Hampton University where I received my bachelor's in liberal studies with a concentration in community and social services. And I got my master's at the University of Pittsburgh in social work with a concentration in community organizing and social administration.
Thank you. So certainly everyone understands that we are working with well-equipped women who are ready to engage in the conversation about the relevance of Black church and what that means for us and how can that help with the issues that we're dealing with in the community. So I'm going to ask the first question to you, Sylvia, and it is, what do you feel the role of the Black churches and the leadership? What do you believe that the role of the Black churches as well as the leadership?
Well, growing up, I'm a PK, and then my brother was a pastor, so always it's just
a little bit. What's a PK for those?
A pastor's kid, a preacher's kid. Yeah. I mean, your daddy was the pastor, you're the preacher's kid. There go that PK. So it was the role first is to meet a spiritual need. I think because we can read the word, but sometimes the pastor can break it down in ways that you don't understand. Two, I think is to bring community together. Right? So when you can come and you can love on each other, support each other. And then I think third is for the leadership of the pastor to give you guidance and support. So, because I remember many times my dad and brother going out in the middle of the night when somebody was hungry or fighting domestic violence or going to the hospital or having a crisis, and they were being there and in the church providing specific services to meet the needs of the community where the church is. I think that's what it should be.
Fantastic. I'm going to start down. We're going to switch it up some. How about you, Kristen? What do you feel?
So I feel the role of the Black church is really to kind of be the pillar in our communities, be that place of foundation. And I think it's really holistic. So my interest in church work really came because I saw the social services organizations and industry really serving my community, and I didn't see the churches. So I feel like our role is to serve the least of these, and that means whatever that looks like in your context, in your space. So if you are in a food desert, serving the least of these means making sure people have food. If you're in a place that is just bombarded with poverty or with crime, like your job is to say, how can I meet this need? Whether it's spiritual, or just like the reality of what you're dealing with. It's trauma, it's loss, it's grief. Our job is to say, how can we stand up? And I know a lot of churches feel like that's not our role, but I think when I say the church, I'm looking past just the building, I'm saying the people, right? So that means all of us as the church, how do we use our talents, our treasures, our skill sets to go and to meet these needs and be the church and serve the least of these. And I think our leadership's job is to position people, to guide people, to say, oh, this is your skill set, this is the need, this is an opportunity for you to live out your faith. When you're preaching on Sunday, it's your responsibility to serve us, it's your responsibility to educate us on what is our responsibility to our neighbor and what is our responsibility to our community, and really contextualize what Christ taught us to do, right? So contextualize what Christ has called us to do in the world and put that into the community context.
That is very good. Thank you. Kiana, how about you? The leadership, the role of the Black churches in leadership. What do you feel that is currently?
I definitely agree with what both of them said, but I also feel like the church also has an obligation to go out and find people to bring in the church. Like, don't just wait for people to come. I feel like it should be a greater presence in the community. Like when you go out, I don't see that anymore. I feel like the church could be a lot more transparent. And I mean, people have this stigma of what church is and what it looks like. And when they don't look like that, then they tend to shy away from it because they don't understand. I feel like as a church, you should be having people that can relate on all levels, going out and, you know, young men, young women, older, whatever. I feel like we need to make our presence a lot more felt and be a lot more transparent and able to relate to people to make them want to come to church. And our presence should be felt in just more than on Sundays. Like, it's things the church should be doing Monday through Friday. It's way more than teaching the gospel, which is very important, but it's so many other aspects that we need to see church presence in our communities on Saturday nights, on Fridays, like just being a lot more present, and not when people think of a church, they think of Sunday morning.
Yes. My pastor, Walt, used to tell me all the time. I used to sit in his office and he used to tell me, I don't want a church with walls. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't know how to do it, but I know I don't want walls. And
Right.
so I think what everyone is saying sounds that really goes to what Pastor Walt used to teach us all the time, is that if people feel that there's walls and there's limitations, is what he was really saying, is that there's limitations to the church, that is not a good representation of Christ. And you're right, Kristen, I love how you say, you know, who is your neighbor? And they should be teaching us, this is what your neighbor, these are the people that are your neighbors. And of course, when he used that parable, it was a people who came and helped was certainly not who you would have thought would have went and helped. It was not, you know, it was not the Pharisee, it was not the Sadducee, it was not the priest that was going to help him, but it was a Samaritan at that time, which was not someone they thought of in a very good way. So the next question is, and thank you, ladies. The next question is, and I'm going to start with, mix it up a little bit. I'm going to start with you, Kristen. Do you think that Martin Luther King would be proud of the current state of the Black church?
No.
Okay. Why not?
Drops mic. No, he's not happy. I think the Black church has become so religious, and we've really gotten away from our responsibility of being in the community. When you look at our leaders, you don't see men and women of God as our leadership. We're worried about leading within our religious communities and not leading the world. Like, we should be in places of power. We should be in places of influence, and we should be taking all of this Jesus with us to those spaces. And I don't see leadership doing that. I don't see them standing up. I don't see them at community meetings. I don't see them talking to politicians. I don't see them advocating for the people who they serve. And that is what Martin Luther King did. That is what John Lewis did. That is what all of our civil rights leaders, a lot of them came from the church. They were meeting in the church. Churches don't even want to open their doors for the community to come in sometimes, because they don't know how they're going to act, or they don't know what they're going to say, and who they might cuss. And it's like, they might cuss. Okay, but all this Jesus we have, like, we should be okay with a cuss word and still be able to keep our salvation, right? So we're missing being the church. And I think we're just caught up in being religious and just the practice of it instead of what is our faith supposed to do. Like, we are not salty. Like, we're not no salt, we not no light, nothing. And I think it's very problematic because that is the job of the leadership, is to cast vision, not just for your congregation, but what does your congregation look like in the community? So to Kiana's point, like, if you're not out there, if you're not engaging people, if you're not serving people, then that's not what Martin Luther King was doing. You know what I mean? It was, the bus boycotts didn't have anything to do with scripture. It wasn't theological. It was serving the least of these. It was making sure, it was being just. It was making sure people had rights, and that was him living out his faith. And I think we've gotten really caught up in Bible and theory of our faith and not in really the application.
I think it's amazing that you say that, and this is a two-part question, being that you come from a bishop's granddaughter on both sides. Like, both of your grandfathers were bishops of a major following. And so for you to be very word grounded, I say that because that's word grounded, you really believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to be able to keep us, and that God is a keeper. And so you're challenging them that because God is mighty, he can hold people coming in that don't look like us, right? And sound like us in a religious sense, and be okay in that environment and in that narrative. That's a two-part question. The other one, and we can do this real quick, I'm going to ask everyone this second part as well. Two things the Black church could do easily to show up in the community today. So they heard your opinion, they hear where you're coming from. What are two things they could easily do right now? And hey, we could change today's, Wednesday. I could do this by next Wednesday.
By next Wednesday.
I mean, I want to make some changes right now. Give me two things I could do right now.
I would say, one, create space. To Kiana's point again, if the only way your church is being utilized is on Sunday morning, you have a problem. Yeah. Like, people are paying tithes and offering and paying a mortgage basically for this church, and this building could do so much more. So Monday through Saturday, it's time to bring your leadership, your trustee board, whoever that is, together to say, how can we utilize this, especially in the time of COVID? How can you, so I would say, one, your space would be my first thing, is how can you leverage your space to be a lighthouse in your community? So outside of Sunday morning, because people might not come in for the word, but they will come in for a food pantry. They will come in for tutoring. They'll come in to play video games. They'll come in for some juice if you got it for free. Like, so how can you create that? And then two, I would do an internal assessment. So the same way in communities, we do asset-based community development. So what are the assets of the community, and how can we focus on them instead of just focusing on what we don't have? But that same assessing the human capital within your church, you could do that by Wednesday. So you have all of these ushers who aren't ushering right now because we're not coming to church. How could they be serving the community? Who could they be calling? How could they be reaching out? So really doing an assessment of the people in your church and seeing what talents and skills, and going outside of like your church imagination, outside of, oh, you can be a trustee, but like, how can they, maybe you have an accountant in your church who can help you diversify your funding so you're not begging people every Sunday to give. Like, how can you get creative and really use the skills that are in the church to
Thank you, Chris.
Well, it's so funny because a lot of things she said I had written down. With Martin Luther King, I agree. No, he wouldn't be happy, because I just think that we have lost the way. It's about rules and regulations now. Like, we're going to make rules. We're not really following what Christ really had in mind for the church. And I always say, what would Christ do? What would Christ, how does he think? What did he do? Christ was in the buildings tearing up the synagogues because he was so frustrated. And that's how I feel sometimes. Like, I'm so frustrated with how y'all think and how judgmental. And it's just so sad. And if I wasn't in the church, I wouldn't want to go to church based on a lot of that I see, So when I moved here from Mansfield, which I love the church that I came from because they were very open, giving, community driven. So I came here thinking, okay, it took me probably 2 years before I joined. I went, and this church is everywhere in Florida, every corner. And I was so hurt and disappointed because it was that same feel, the judgy, I would go in churches and they would look at me and turn their head and not speak. The greeters wouldn't greet you. It wasn't a feel of love there. I ended up going to a white church for 2 years. They were community driven. They love people. As soon as you get in, hey, what do you want to do? What we want, they get you involved right away. They had so many things going on.
Sylvia, why do you think that? I'm sorry, that is such a good point, that we find out that our light-skinned brothers and sisters sometimes our white brothers and sisters, is what I'm calling light-skinned, are a lot of times more community focused in the Black church. And that's why even when Kristen was talking about diversifying money and increasing so you're not begging your congregation for money, which is an amazing concept that I definitely want you to talk about later. But how do Black churches use the platform of being a pastor versus white churches?
Can I add to that? Before that final question, the first question you asked about the difference in us being community oriented, I think it's really rooted in economic disparities. So people are easily giving. It's not I give because they're comfortable. They have the means to give. So they give to their church. When they die, they leave money. They have endowments. Our churches aren't receiving that. There are people, you have stay-at-home moms. You have people who have the flexibility to go and serve the church in ways that oftentimes we're not positioned to do. We don't have the finances to just be like, oh, I'm gonna give a $500 offering. I'm gonna get this tithes and offering, and whatever I got left over is what you're gonna get. So I think we're coming from a different place. One, two, we're dealing with the issues of our community within our community. We're not going out and saying, oh, there's been a death or there's somebody hungry outside of the church, let's go serve them. The people who are losing loved ones, the people who are hungry, they're within our church. Yes. So a lot of that benevolence remains inside because we don't have the people to go out and do the work because our people still need served. And it's not everybody, but I just think proportionally it's a lot more in our communities.
Do you think that there's enough Black wealth to create a church that is not, that has enough wealth in it or enough middle class people in it, that if it was focused on community, it could create that same atmosphere? Do you think that poverty is the reason we do not serve on the same? Is that the only issue?
Well, I currently, when I moved here, I attend the church now, and the pastor, like I said, he was a former NFL player, and he said he thinks differently because he didn't grow up churchy, so he thinks outside the box. But most of the people that attend, middle to high class African American people, Black folks, they own their attorneys, their doctors, they own several McDonald's, or they do this and that. So they give, like you said, like the white church, they're giving. So every Tuesday, like today, they're just giving away food. And then his goal is to have a grocery store that you can just come in and get. You're not paying. If you need it, come on. That's the pastor's goal. They go into the community, the lower end community, and we're just giving away clothes. I'm like, this is crazy. Like their heart is about giving. We have groups every day, even online, groups for the single mom, divorced mom. I'm going to do the grief share thing, anything, blended families. For the kids, they have it going on. But it's their mentality, and like you said, the economics of people that attend too. I think it does make a difference.
I think so too. Yeah. I also want to say that we have a lot of little churches, a lot of image, rather than gathering all together and making it one church to give it economic strength. But I'm not going to go there because that's the platform that I think we as Blacks care about, is that the prestige of being that person, rather than coming together and we're all pastors and we're all leaders in one church, because are we wealthy enough to have 15 churches?
Yeah. Well, and I would say also when we think about status, right? The Black church was really the only place where people were able to have status at first.
Yes.
You couldn't be a doctor, you couldn't be a lawyer, but you could be a preacher, and
Right.
everybody listened to you. And even now, especially in like the Kojic church, where you don't have to have a seminary degree, you could just be called,
Right.
and you go and you preach, and now you're a pastor. So it's easier to come into this kind of position, whereas having another career would require more work, would require, education, and being a pastor doesn't do that. So it's easier to say, that's how I'm gonna get my status.
Thank you. Thank you. And that is what I think that we're going to get into a little bit, is whether or not we have had that conversation in Black community about that maybe we have all these little churches that if they gather together one, but that doesn't happen due to the status. That. And I was blessed to be, it's status.
Because we have a bunch of churches with 10 members, and like you said, come together, and you can be
a home mortgage,
a pastor over this. Because even at our church, we have a different pastors, but they're pastors over certain areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So. And you would have, like you just said, Kristen, one mortgage. All these people, one mortgage, because we would all be going and doing one thing. And you could even be from the same denomination and have 15 of the same denominations. That would be crazy to me to have 15 McDonald's all within the same radius.
And then generating.
And you can have different. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just said in generating all that wealth within one.
Right.
Yeah.
And still being able to provide a unique worship experience. Like, absolutely. Just because we're one church doesn't mean there only is one service where, it's the same hand clapping, foot stomping, rolling on the floor. Okay, maybe your 1 o'clock is more traditional. Maybe your 2 o'clock is more modern, and you have these different pastors who kind of take ownership over the various sites. The church I attend, super community oriented. We actually use another church. So we're basically renting out that church, and while Freedom is its own church, they are not paying. I mean, they're paying rent, but they don't, and they work together. So if there's something wrong with the heater and the boiler, both of these churches, their administrators are coming together to say, okay, what do we need to do to fix this?
Right.
Absolutely. And those are the ideas that I want this to create, this conversation. That when you talked about funds and looking at the money that you have coming in differently, and you're absolutely right that we have to take the poverty narrative into consideration of our people and the way wealth is being distributed in America. But when we say that, we also have to understand that other cultures, when they come to America, all live in the same house for a while.
That's true.
That's true. House. And why do we do that? Because we understand that we don't have the wealth for 12 homes. That came together.
That is true.
You just made that pop in my head. What are 2 things, Sylvia, that you would have them do right away? To tomorrow.
Today.
Yes,
be more open and welcoming. Because not judgy, not looking, not whatever. Come, like you said, everybody, come as you are. Be open, not judgy. Because I remember it was a young man, I guess he was dealing with sexuality, the way he dressed, the transit, and that came to Oasis. And Paul was like, listen, this is how we're going to deal with this. Ain't nobody going to talk about them, judge them, because you have to be prepared, because the world has changed. Now, but we have to be a witness, and we have to learn to love and quit judging. And because my experience of when I was pregnant and the pastor's daughter was horrible. I would never want anybody to feel like I felt, you know what I'm saying? Because how people, now mind you, I have people who supported me and loved me, but those ones, it was terrible. And you have to be support. That's when I needed more love and support, and and so I want the church to be more open and loving and quit all these rules that don't make no sense. Like, where did these rules come from? Let it go.
Not the Bible.
Right. Nothing is biblical. That's what I'm saying. It's not
the
biblical.
Bible.
Yes, and I think that you're asking them to be intentional. And we're going to talk a little bit about that a little later too. How about you, Kiana? Do you think that MLK would be proud of us right now?
No, absolutely not. For one, we don't even have the passion as the people that he had. And that's a part of it too. I feel like he was doing the work for us as a whole. Like he was looking at the bigger picture. I think nowadays it's more individualized, even as churches. I mean, people aren't even worried about the next church. I mean, they're not worried about everybody as a whole. It's more individualized, and we're not unified enough to even for MLK to even take us serious right now. So no, he's definitely not happy.
Yeah, I love the two words you said. You said number one, passion. Passion is the fuel. I mean, that's going to make you get up every morning. I love
Right.
it, when Mel Gibson, I think is his name, did The Passion of Christ, is that it was a good name for it, because to go through what you go through, there has to be a passion. And you're exactly right. We're not seeing that same passion. And number two is the idea that I keep on hearing is individualized, that everything is about me and what I'm bringing and how can I have status and how can my church be the biggest, rather than thinking of it as a community, as let's all come together. And even if we did not leave our churches, even if we functioned community service wise as one unit, would be healthy. So that is,
Right.
I love that. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, and I also think that we've gotten comfortable, just like us four women here. Like all have experience, education, all have income, all are able to provide and do for ourselves. And I think that back then, that wasn't as popular now. So people weren't as passionate. It's like, oh, okay, like I'm settled. I do my shopping online. I'm just worried about me. I'm gonna read my word. It's really not the same passion, because the freedoms that they were fighting for, it's like now that we obtained them, we haven't figured out how to use them to move forward and progress. It's like, oh, okay, well, I voted. I go to church, it ain't got bombed. I'm gonna do my little shopping online. And hey, it's fine. Like, I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna keep it moving. It's like we're not even worried about our neighbor anymore. And that's one of the biggest things where I think that where we like become stagnant.
Yes. I had a conversation with a pastor and I told him the struggles of some of my clients, and he looked at me and he said, I had no idea. And I think it goes back to Kristen saying that the pastors are not teaching us who our neighbors are. I don't think that we know even what is going on in the community. And the reason we don't know is because a lot of times our pastors do not know. And I think that what you're saying is exactly, and if I could add one to Kristen's list, is the two things you can do. I would add on, and I think someone said this, go and like you said, survey your community, not only your congregation, but go to social services, find a social worker and say, tell me about your caseload. What are our people doing out here? What are our graduation rates? How many of our children are in juvenile right now? I got 4 African-American males that I don't have placement for right now, and I have no mentors for them. And I told that pastor, and he says, we're going to work on that. And so not work on it, but today I called the judge in order to meet with the judge to find out where we're going to put these 4 young men whose fathers are either dead or in prison.